the fourth edition of the Building Strong Data Ecosystems for SDG series. And my name is Alexander Loschke. I work in the Data Innovation and Capacity branch of the UN Statistics Division. Let me try to share my screen. So we have today our speakers, Rosy Mondardini from the Citizen Science Center and Elena Prodan from Untitled, who will present on citizen science and citizen-generated data for monitoring the SDGs. But before I start, I would like to introduce to you the global network of data officers and statisticians, for those who don't know it yet. So the global network of statisticians and data officers is a facilitated professional online social community, which was launched in October 2020. So during World Statistics Day, and which is hosted on a platform called Yammer. We have already more than 1,000 users from national statistical systems, UN system entities, and other organizations, including from resident coordinator offices and UN country teams. The aim of the global network is to help national governments build resilient and sustainable national data and information systems for the full implementation of the SDGs through collaboration, knowledge sharing, networking, and technical support. So this slide shows you a little bit what you can do on the network already. So you can get informed about events and activities held globally. You can build your capacity by attending live webinars like this one today. You can advertise job and consultancy opportunities, find and share expertise on specific topics, connect with a global community of statisticians, geospatial data experts, and data officers, and exchange best practices, notably on the SDG monitoring, but any other statistics as well. So the 4 keywords for the global network are collaboration, coordination, connection, and capacity building. This is how the global network looks like. So if you haven't done so yet, please join the global network today by going to yammer.com/UNstats and join the network. And it's really easy. Please, if possible, register with your office email address, because this makes it a little bit easier to identify where you work, and will also expedite the joining process. So now I come to, I will introduce today's webinar. So we will be talking about citizen science and citizen-generated data for monitoring the SDGs. With us, Rosy Mondardini and Elena Prodan. And so citizen-generated data offer a number of opportunities to help address the issues of timeliness and granularity of data for SDG decision-making. It may often serve as a useful complement in a number of areas to official statistics, particularly when it comes to global and national SDG indicators. Rosy will speak about the manner in which citizen science can contribute to generating data relevant for the SDGs, and will discuss the success factors behind vibrant citizen science communities and projects. Elena will give a brief presentation of a study designed and carried out as part of the EU-funded Crowd for SDG project, with advisory support from UNSD, UNCBD, IIASA, GPSDD, UN Women and Citizen, and sorry, the Citizen Science Center. I guess Elena will also explain what all those abbreviations mean for those who don't know them. So Elena will talk about how this project was created to examine challenges and opportunities presented by citizen science data as a potential data source for monitoring the SDGs from the point of view of official statistics, the official statistics community and national data users. Let me now introduce our speakers. We have Rosy Mondardini is the Managing Director of the Competence Center Citizen Science, a joint effort of the University of Zurich and the ETH Zurich to promote and support citizen science projects at both universities in Switzerland and beyond. She is also co-director at the Citizen Cyber Lab, a partnership between CERN, UNITAR, and the University of Geneva, aimed at developing new forms of public participation in research. Rosy has a background in physics and started her scientific career at CERN, where she did almost 10 years of scientific research before refocusing her energy and passion to science for social change. Mrs. Elena Proden is a senior specialist in UNITA's unit for the strategic implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Elena is currently leading research, analysis, and advisory services for UN member states in 2 areas: strategic planning and data and statistics for SDGs. Elena acts as a team leader overseeing the design and delivery of a number of learning, training, and research projects and tools to support the implementation of the SDGs. She has also provided methodological support for the piloting of these tools at regional and country level in many world regions. So before I hand over to Rosy, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. We will first hear both speakers, and we'll then have the Q&A session at the end. But please feel free to write your questions into the meeting chat at any time. And then we can later on either ask the question for you, or you can also use the raise my hand function of WebEx, and we will give the floor to you and you can ask your question yourself. This Global Network webinar is recorded and will be made available on the Global Network of Data Officers and Statisticians at yammer.com/UNstats. And we would like to invite you to continue the discussions with our speakers on the Global Network after the seminar. So I will now unshare my screen and hand over to Rosy. Rosy, thank you very much for giving this presentation today. I hand over to you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexander, and thank you and Elena for giving me the opportunity to do this presentation. Unfortunately, I don't have the right to share my screen, while I would like to share some slides, if possible.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, I'm working on it. So it's not as straightforward.
So in the meantime, maybe a few words about the center. So as Alexander said, I am the managing director of the Citizen Science Center in Zurich. This is an initiative of the university and ETH, and the goal of the center is really to support both researchers and the general public that want to start citizen science project. And the support is with the methodology, with tools, with community management, and everything that is basically needed to do this kind of projects. Okay, so my presentation is divided in two parts. I will start with an introduction of the concept of citizen science, as I am not sure of how many of you are aware of what we mean exactly when we talk about citizen science and citizen science data. And then the second part on how this can help on the SDG effort. So, citizen science. If you search this on the web or also in the literature, you find a lot of different definitions. I report here two of them that I like. One is very official, is from the Oxford English Dictionary, that defines citizen science as the scientific work undertaken by members of the general public, often in collaboration or under the direction of professional scientists. And then the second that I report, I kind of like it because it's less official, more pragmatic somehow, and really reflects the variety that is under the umbrella of citizen science, which is defined as a broad range of activities where people produce scientific knowledge outside of traditional scientific institutions. And I will give some examples later on, but just to be clear, we are talking about those projects where you have, potentially hundreds of thousands of people, collecting images of birds or animal or flower with their smartphone, or collecting sample of water to, test the pollution, or people that, look at images on the web, maybe images from satellites to monitor deforestation. So we are talking about this kind of projects where you have, the crowd outside contributing to some research. And all of these different definitions that you find on the web have some point in common. The first one is that citizen science implies public participation. So anybody out there can potentially join on a voluntary basis. So it's pretty rare in citizen science to pay people. We will see later that there are other ways to give back. So the contributions are voluntary. And the goal is to produce some science-based new knowledge. So there are different ways to look at citizen science projects. And I think that especially in this context, where we are somehow comparing citizen science to citizen-generated data, it is important, actually, let me put it in this way. I assume somehow that you are all familiar with the concept of citizen-generated data. And citizen science is just one form of citizen-generated data, where the particularity is that is data where the community of citizens collaborate with scientists. So somehow in these projects, you have most of the time professional researchers that are helping or behind or collaborating with the project. So one way to look at the projects is, first of all, to see how intense is this collaboration, let's say, or how much are the two communities actually collaborating. And you have three, general groups. The first group is the contributory kind of projects, and that is where the researchers, the scientists decide what to do and then ask for the help of citizens. So somehow you can say these projects are pretty top-down because the scientists are the ones that somehow keep the power on the projects and the citizens are only contributing. Then there are the collaborative projects where the collaboration between the two communities is a little bit more meaningful, let's say, and sometimes the citizens collaborate in the design of the experiment, in the design of the process, or they may, for instance, contribute to the dissemination. Sometimes they even sign the papers. And then there is co-creation, and the projects that belong to this group are the one where the interaction between the citizens and the scientists, the two communities, is maximal. And you can have citizens that are, the one that actually propose a research question. And all of the different phases of the research, scientific research cycle, are done together with the two communities. So this is just one way to look at the projects. Another way is to ask what are citizens contributing. So independently from how much they are collaborating with scientists or not, what are they actually asked to do? And again, here, and I am really doing an overgeneralization because the reality is, as you can imagine, way more complicated than this. But let's say that in general, you have two main groups of projects. The first one is where citizens contribute data. So data collection can be active, can be passive. Active, we mean when citizens, again, very often with their smartphone, they go out and they collect data for you. Smartphone, kits, they actually decide to collect data for you in an active way. Passive is more, let's say, Internet of Things or social media, or maybe people wearing health wearable, I don't know, Fitbits. So they provide data, but they are not really consciously doing that. And here, a couple of examples, again, very well known. One is iNaturalist. You may have known about this. These are actually more than 3 million people by now that, again, most of the time with a smartphone, they contribute images, geolocated images of biodiversity. Can be animals, can be plants. And this is a very famous project. You can also somehow gather that from the numbers that you see here. Another project, again, different kind of data collection. This is with kits, with measurement devices that people in the Flanders in Belgium put outside their window. And what they did by doing this, they basically were sampling the quality of air in the street. And these data were used to build a very detailed map, really at the street level of the quality of air in a full region in Belgium. So these were just two examples of data collection. And then the other second big group is data analysis projects. And these are projects where people usually sit behind of a computer and they do some kind of tasks that even, despite all of the advancement of AI, are still extremely difficult if done by computers. So this can be image analysis, pattern recognition, transcription or translation of text. And again, just a couple of examples, so it's clear really what we are talking about. This is a very well-known projects where citizens were helping astronomers to classify galaxies. This is more than 10 years old. More than 300,000 people contributed to Galaxy Zoo, helping, again, looking at images from galaxies and helping to classify them. This is another project, just to give you an example. This is linguistics. And these are people looking at old document, handwritten document in, covering different German dialects in Switzerland, and either transcribing the handwritten document or translating them in current German. Or again, another example of projects. This is, very short video clips that are taken with camera traps distributed all over Switzerland. And then people are simply asked to look at the short video and then help scientists identify exactly which was the animal in the trap. And the idea is to study the decline of population of weasels in Switzerland. So these were just, a few examples. And as I said, a very broad categorization of citizen science. However, in this short time, I think is certainly precise enough somehow to give you an idea of the kind of projects that citizen science covers. Very quickly, why we do that? I mean, why scientists do this and why citizens do that? From the point of view of scientists, I think that the benefits are quite clear. And it's mainly a question of resources. Because in this case, you compare your small, academic group of researchers, where usually you have, a few researchers, a few PhD students maybe, and you compare these to potentially, and again, potential, because this is not the reality, but potentially everybody out there being able and willing to collaborate to your research. Scientists also do this because this is a very good opportunity for dissemination and really to promote and illustrate the impact of their work. And then the last point mentioned here is very important and very much appreciated really from the scientific community. That is that when you involve citizens that are not expert into a certain scientific study, they come with a very fresh, very new perspective that very, very often really enrich the scientist and the research with new ideas and new point of view. Concerning the citizens, there are a lot of studies that have been done in the past and they are published about why citizens, spend their weekends classifying galaxies or, translating things. Why do they do that? And in all of these studies, the main answer, the main reason given by the citizens was the personal satisfaction of doing something bigger than you. So contributing to science, contributing to, global knowledge. So this sense of being useful somehow in the things that you do. And then, of course, there are opportunity of, learning and education. Usually people contribute to projects that are, on the subject that they love, that is their passion, or maybe topics for which they are worried. So there is always a component of motivation, of learning and education skill. Then there is the networking part. Most of these projects offer, forums or ways to get in contact with the scientists, but also with the other participants. So it's a very nice opportunity to get to know and get in contact with peers that have your same interest or passion. And then, some of these projects are fun and doing this, doing that can, help you spend a rainy weekend. And, some of them are actually even gamified. So some of them are simply interesting and fun to watch. Some of them are really designed as games. So one question that comes up a lot of times, and probably this would be very important for you as well to know, is about data quality. How can you trust data collected by people that are not expert? And again, we can go deeper in the questions, but I would like to highlight immediately that there have, of course, been many, many studies on this, publication papers. There are many different ways you can make sure of the quality of data, and you can, double check, triple check with different ways the accuracy of your data. And the result is that the quality of citizen contributions equal the one of professional scientists, simply because if you do things in the correct way, the methodology has the same level of accuracy as traditional scientific methods. I'm moving now to the second part of my presentation, and this is, so now we have understood what is citizen science, which kind of data and analysis that deals with, and we will see how the citizen science community thinks that this kind of data can help, especially in three aspects of tackling the SDGs, which is monitoring, localizing, and implementing. So just a very quick summary of what basically I've said up to now. I think that the advantages of citizen science data at this point are somehow clear. And they have to do with the spatial resolution of the data, the temporal resolution of the data, and I will go a little bit deeper in this in next slide, the aspect of transparency that comes with involving citizens in data collections, and the aspect of education and change of behavior. And what I wanted to underline is that, especially for the first two, you know, the spatial and the temporal dimension of this kind of data, they have to do a lot with cost, so with saving money in terms of data collection, because we all know that traditional data sources, the ones that are used most of the time to collect this kind of data, can be quite expensive. And because of this, they are often a barrier for some countries, especially developing countries, to monitor and assess the progresses. So about space and time, again, I think it's pretty obvious if you assume, and again, it's a big assumption because most of the time this is not true. But let's say in theory, everybody out there could be helping you with your data. And again, it's not true because, you know, you are competing with Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and a lot of people are still, you know, in those platforms more than on citizen science. However, we are still, you know, we saw some of the projects with, you know, hundreds of thousands of citizens participating. So from the point of view of the space, you have, you know, simply a denser and more abundant observation. You know, any smartphone can collect geolocated images that can be used as some sort of data. And also these data not only are more in terms of quality, but they also can come from remote regions which are hard to reach for, you know, the typical researchers or you know, person from the national statistical offices. In terms of time, is the same. I mean, citizen science projects can really run for a long time. They can be very frequent. They can be, you know, very short challenges run maybe over a weekend, but every month or every few months or every year. So the flexibility that this kind of data collection allows, it's for both dimensions is huge. So this kind of data can obviously be used very easily for monitoring the SDG. This is what really the kind of message that we would like to pass. And they can help national statistical offices fill the gaps. And again, please, the thing is, citizen science practitioners are not trying to say that this data can substitute official sources of data. I mean, this is obviously not true. What we are trying to say is that this kind of data can certainly contribute and somehow, together with national data, basically give a better and disaggregated view of the reality of nations, basically. There is also the component that they somehow ensure that groups that are often marginalized are represented in the data sets and so given a voice. So the second aspect of where we think that citizen science data can help is in the localization. And here by localization, there are really two different aspects. One is, you know, data localization in terms real of granularity. So somehow give, capture, let's say, the variation of data within a country. But there is also the aspect of localizing issues. We know that the definition of the targets and of the indicators as done by, you know, the UN in the definition of the 17 goals, sometimes really is as little sense at the local level for certain regions. So there is a certain need to make the targets and the indicator more meaningful and more relevant to people in certain region. And citizen science projects are very local in nature, so they kind of do this in a very natural way. They include indigenous knowledge, and they really can complement, the method and the knowledge with local capacities. And then the third one is the implementation. I mentioned before education and change of behavior as one of the consequences of citizen science. And this has been demonstrated, has been published. When you do this kind of hands-on activity, there is let's say they are very effective in terms of education. So there is the aspect of accountability and transparency of involving people, but there is also the aspect that by collecting data themselves, citizens end up feeling ownership of the data, and so feeling ownership of the issue. And somehow this is a way to generate awareness of certain problems, and for people to really use this data for community actions, for decision making in very different ways. And the ultimate somehow consequence of all of these activities, it's really a change of attitude of people and a change of behavior. So not only monitoring and measuring the SDGs, but somehow getting there, reaching the SDGs. So the last few slides is just to tell you that this is somehow happening already. So this comes from, and I really I forgot to put the reference to this publication, but I saw that Dilek, which is one of the major author of this publication, is actually in the audience. So Dilek, if you can maybe pass in the chat the reference to this paper. This has been published recently and basically shows how citizen science project and citizen science data are already contributing to the monitor of 5 SDGs indicators. And you can see, the 5 listed here. But they can potentially contribute to 76 additional indicators. So there is a lot of potential there that for some reason it hasn't been tapped into yet. And the greatest contribution, again, traditionally citizen science has a strong field in biodiversity, and this is, I guess, by now obvious on how easy it can be for people to contribute to this kind of data, but also for the environment. Just a couple of examples, again, of projects that have already contributed. If you looked at the previous slides, there was, in the indicators that have already been somehow covered by citizen science project, that is, plastic debris in water or fresh water studies. And these are 2 of the projects that contributed. This is a project from the UK, FreshWaterWatch. And you can see, the numbers again that can somehow be a font of inspiration. More than 8,000 participants that are, monitoring on a regular basis more than 2,500 water bodies. And these data have been, used by the scientists for their scientific publication, but they've been used by the citizens as well for policy recommendation in more than 35 cities around 16 countries. So when data are collected in the proper way, they really have this double use, that is, scientists can go ahead and do their scientific publication, but people, citizens, organizations, governments can really use the data to change policies. And another one is a very famous one in Australia for, collecting plastic debris. Again, here you can look at the number. This is a lot of people that is on a very regular basis monitoring, the beaches in Australia, collecting all of the kind of debris, classifying them and counting them. Opportunities for the future. I think Elena now will tell you a little bit more of what is happening in this field, which means, again, applying citizen science for SDGs monitoring in an EU project that started working almost 1 year ago. What we identified in that project and what is anyhow somehow of an obvious let's say next step of like potential fields really where these can be used in the future are for these kind of goals. So for life on land, sustainable cities and communities, a lot of work going on there, global health, and of course water and sanitation. I will stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. And yeah, I'm opening. Actually, maybe I don't know if you want to have question now or if we just move to Elena.
Thanks so much, Rosie. I think we will just continue right away with Elena, and then we can take all the questions at the end. Elena, I have made you now presenter. You should have presentation rights. And then so after you have spoken, then we will take all questions.
Okay, now
You're
figured
muted.
out where to unmute myself.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. Let me just do the presentation view.
Yeah.
So is that okay?
Looks good.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yes.
So I will keep it very short so that we have space for questions and answers. In any case, my part was more sort of to share very quickly as part of an announcement of what we are doing right now. And also if there is some interest or you have suggestions from your end on who might be the right stakeholders or could help us encourage some of the stakeholders to participate in this research that we are carrying out, that's a little bit of a background information to share with you. So basically, as part of a Crowd for SDG project, which is funded, as Rosie mentioned, by the European Commission, and that has several partners that you can see their logos on the top of this slide, led by the University of Geneva, and I'm of course representing UNITAR as also UN partner in this consortium. There are also several universities, European universities, who are involved. Milano Politecnico, Jesus, who was answering some of the questions in the chat box, he's from the Consejo Superior de Investigaciones Científicas from Spain. And we also have University of Paris and CERN, the European Nuclear Research Center, as members of this consortium. And Rosy is also, her center is associated with this project. So what I will focus on, the project has several components. It also has parts that are more really basically running innovation cycles, basically where there is a call for citizen science projects. And then there is some support provided by partners, the tools developed by some partners, such as, for example, the CSIC or Politecnico and University of Geneva that have been developed that are being also used. And then we also hope that as part of these cycles that are carried out each year, some of the projects may have some potential really for supporting data generation for monitoring the SDGs. However, in my presentation, I will focus on the part for which UNITAR is responsible. It's really a research study on understanding how citizen science can support the monitoring of the SDGs. And as Rosie mentioned, there was an excellent publication done earlier this year by a group of scientists led by Zurich from the International Institute of Applied System Analysis. That's one of the abbreviations on the list mentioned by Alexander, who did some work, or a lot of work, actually quite exhaustive mapping of all global SDG indicators, trying to understand to which indicators citizen science could contribute in terms of contributing data, basically. And as Rosy mentioned, there are around 76 indicators identified. And currently, in fact, 5 global indicators already benefit from citizen science data. However, the focus of this study is to really understand the perspective, the perceptions of national statistical offices and national statistical systems, to see where they would see the greatest potential to fill some of the gaps that they may have, where they would be interested to run some experimental projects using citizen science, and also understand policy needs. And basically, this study is focusing more on really understanding relevance needs on the one hand, and quality considerations and limitations on the other. So just very quickly, basically we are rolling out a survey that has 3 tracks. And that would be the first track that is, I guess, most relevant in the context of this community. That's the track that is intended for official statistics community. So we'll be sending out invitations to national statistical offices, to chief statisticians, to help us invite their staff to complete the survey basically online, but also to members of international organizations who are also official statistics experts. Then the second track is intended more for data users, policymakers, but also those who contribute in one way or another to producing data, as administrative data is part of their program management processes, for example, and also those at local level. And the last track is intended for citizen science communities to understand what kind of projects they may have been running that may potentially be useful for generating data relevant for SDG indicators. And here, actually, we also sort of understand SDG indicators also more broadly. Of course, we ask questions about global SDG indicator frameworks, but since many countries have also homegrown national SDG indicator frameworks, so the purpose is really to understand where citizen science can be helpful at a national level for producing indicators that are nationally relevant for monitoring progress on SDGs. And then we will be holding also a number of key informant interviews to understand a little bit better the answers. So basically, in terms of the survey, particularly for official statistics community, we will be looking at the sort of awareness around citizen science data potential. And also in some cases, if there are already some successful experiences or some experiences in this area, then looking at the quality considerations and perhaps also some enabling and impeding factors that may be preventing the broad use of citizen science data. And also in those cases where there have been some experiences, also taking stock of the lessons learned, and also how some of the challenges that may have been encountered when it comes to, for example, the quality of data or some other issues, how they could be also sometimes addressed upfront, or if there are some other ways to sort of work around and still ensure the necessary quality of data. so that it can be useful source of data also for producing official statistics. And then finally, relevance. Of course, relevance, it's one of the important considerations when it comes to when we talk about the quality of data, and also UN fundamental principles of official statistics. Here, we will be asking more specific questions for which indicators or for which sectoral policies, for example, do national statistical offices, but also other ministries may see the greatest potential and the greatest need when it comes to leveraging citizen science data. And we'll be producing a set of recommendations. So basically, the key outputs, as you can see here, will be a report. Then we'll be preparing a policy brief, also jointly with the organizations who have been actually supporting this study by providing their advice. And then also a policy brief and report will contain hopefully a number of good practice cases. Rosy has already mentioned some examples, but we hope that we'll be able to identify also some other as part of this research. And just to quickly mention, you can see here the list also of colleagues, a lot of them from the UN, but not only, from Global Partnership on Sustainable Development, UN Convention on Biodiversity. Gillian Campbell, she was also actually a contributing author for the publication led by DILIC. Given the importance that citizen science data already plays for producing some environmental indicators. Sara Duerto Valerio from UN Women, and actually this project, in terms of the specific innovations, also has a special focus for next year on gender-related statistics. DILIC, whom we've already mentioned, and also Rosy, of course, herself, and very importantly also colleagues from UN Statistics Division, Gabriel, who is present today, and by the way, it was his idea to propose a webinar as part of this work with a focus on citizen science data, and also Luis Gonzalez and Vibeke Nielsen, who have provided very useful guidance when it comes to the design of the study. And that's it. I would just like to mention, you can see my email address here. So if you have a story to share, or you know that someone has a story to share, or you would like to participate in a survey or in an interview, please feel free to send me an email. And or also write in a chat on Yammer, basically. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena, for this presentation as well. So we would now come to our Q&A session, so questions and answers session. We still have about, well, I would say 15 minutes roughly, or maybe a little bit more for the questions and answers. And I was trying to monitor everything that was going on in the chat. I'm not sure if I quite managed to handle everything, but I saw that there were a couple of questions around the motivation of for the participants, so the citizens who participate in the citizen-generated data, what their motivation is. I think Rosy has covered that. There were a couple of questions around whether certain types of data can be classified as citizen-based data as well. So there was a question whether data from the Central Statistical Office can also be considered data, citizen-generated data, and whether RTM surveys, so I guess that's real-time measurement surveys, can be classified as citizen-generated data. Maybe we start with this last question, or again, maybe a little bit defining what citizen-generated data actually is.
I don't know, I can add my view, and I think that all of the data that you mentioned somehow are citizen-generated data. You know, surveys when are the citizens and the families, the households that reply, that is obviously generated by citizens. So the definition of citizen-generated data is quite wide. However, citizen science data are a very special part, a very special subset of this data. Simply because, again, there is somehow this scientific component to it that comes both from the collaboration with professional scientists for the design of the study, you know, the insurance in terms of the quality of the data, so applying the methodology in a way that can help guarantee data quality, but also for the role that citizens have. So when citizens reply to a survey, I mean, there is nothing scientific about them. They are, I mean, for me personally, replying to a survey is not citizen science, because the citizen science part is when the citizens contribute to the research. So they can, yes, answer to certain questions. They can, yes, you know, collect the data for you and take images, but somehow they're also given the power to then, first of all, own the data, analyze that data, and potentially together with the scientists, evolve the analysis, the interpretation, and the further data collection. So somehow the citizens are active contributors of data in citizen science, while again, in many forms of citizen-generated data, for instance, all of the passive form of data, you know, citizens are simply data providers. And again, doesn't mean, you know, citizens are happy to do that most of the time. However, you know, it's not what I would call citizen science.
Thank you, Rosy. Then I think Sean wanted to ask another question. I mean,
yeah.
Sean,
Hi.
Sean,
So I'm Sean. I'm one of the. I work with Alex on the global network occasionally. One of the questions from Gabriel Gamis came into chat, and I just wanted to pose it to our participants and see what their responses were, because there's some chatter in the chat, just to get it on the recording. So, question to Rosy from Gabriel. He says, "Hi, Rosy and Elena. Thank you for your presentation. How could we secure, in particular in light of recent events, that citizens do not get manipulated by some groups to provide data that can support their interests and theories? Are you aware of some principles or code of ethics of citizen-generated science and data that would secure the quality of data?" I thought this is a great question. I'd like to hear your responses.
Sean, can I just intervene? Hi, Rosy.
Yes.
And Elena, thank you very much. And also thank you for thanking me for having a little bit supported this presentation. I mean, the thing is that, Rosy, something that is important, and you answered the question already, saying that we have, of course, techniques to secure that. Maybe one day you are going to work on kind of code of ethics. You just to see that we are, most of us are statisticians, right? Official statistics, which is also a science. Statistics is a science. So already the collection of data is a science, not only what you are going to do with that, but already to collect it. But what I wanted to say is that official statistics is also qualified not only on how different stakeholders are involved, but about some definition of, I would say, principles during the process of the collection and the processing of the information. Is there something you have in mind to be able, in the definition of citizen-generated science and data, to say they are qualified citizen-generated data and science if the overall process is done according to a certain code of ethics? This is my question, Rosy. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, because this is a very interesting and very relevant question. And so, yeah, I mean, somehow I mentioned the reply here and there. So citizen science is not something that is new and made up now. There is a long history of citizen science. So there is a methodology that has been developed somehow over the year and tens of years on the way you do things correctly. So you say, of course, I mean, statistics is a science, and statisticians do things, in a certain way. The same is for every kind of scientist and every kind of field. And citizen science projects can cover every field. And depending on the field, for what I am concerned, or like, let's say, for the way we do science, citizen science, at least at the University of Zurich in our center, is the collaboration with the scientist is somehow the way that give you some assurance at the level of the process. Okay, so you as a statistician have a way to collect data. Scientists in, let's say, biology or astronomy or whatever, they have a way to collect data. And the fact that they are collaborating with the citizens in the particular project in that field can somehow already guarantee at the level of the process, at least, that things are done in the correct way. Then at the level of data themselves, of course, citizens could be there and, to try to trick you. Honestly, I've done citizen science from, quite a long time, and it never happened to me. I mean, that the fact that citizens really voluntarily come and give wrong data, but they can. I mean, this is not excluded. And again, you use a lot, for instance, statistics to cure that. For instance, you are classifying an image. You would never ask just one citizen. You ask 10 citizens or 20 citizens, and then you do your distribution. And this is, at least the basic functionality that is already implemented in most of the citizen science platform by default. And then there are other ways you can compare the results with the expert results. You can build a reputation at the level of the citizens that contribute. So there are many different ways that these can be somehow prevented, let's say, or cured.
Thanks so much, Rosy. This leads me actually directly to some other questions that I saw in the chat. So there were questions surrounding quality, and I think you now already elaborated on this aspect as already to explain how quality can be assured during this process of citizen science and citizen-generated data. There was another question which went into another direction, which is periodicity of the data collection. So how can you ensure with citizen-generated data, citizen science, that data is collected in, I would say, regular intervals or in sufficient intervals? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that.
So this somehow touches in two aspects, one of which is critical to citizen science. The first is really, again, is very difficult to generalize because each project is very specific, is very special. So as I said, you may run your project just for a weekend, or you may run your project as a challenge. We did it, for instance, with the project that we ran with WHO. It's about, snake recognition for the snake bite, global health issue. And we ran that project just for 2 weekends. There was a prize. It was very motivating. People came and they stayed and they did it. So you can design it in this way, or you can design it as a 1 year long, data collection with no time boundaries. So the design is one thing you can play with in order to guarantee that you get the amount of data that you need. But the real problem of citizen science is that, as I said before, you are not paying citizens. So, they don't owe you anything. If they don't want to come back, they don't. And it's really up to you and to the project organizer to design your project and to give back somehow in a way that you guarantee not only that people come and they contribute the first time, but they keep coming back and they keep contributing. And this is one of the main challenges of citizen science. And this, the science and art of community management, which is very much underestimated when people start the citizen science project, but it is crucial, is very important, and it's hard. And basically, you have to find a way to give back to your community in a way that motivates them to come back and to stay with you. And it's not difficult, you know. Sometimes it's just what they're looking for is knowledge. You know, it's just enough for you to get back to your community and say, hey, this is what you're doing, we are doing with your data. You know, hey, this is like the first conclusion that we had, you know, or things like that, that make people feel appreciated, gives them some kind of value. And it's a reason that most of the time it's just good enough for them to come back.
Thanks so much. I see that we have already also a question by Walter Rath. Walter, if you feel comfortable, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Okay, so I am unmuted. As a follow-up to Gabriel, by the way, hi, Gabriel and Alexander. A question to Rosy, and I would come back to the distinction that Gabriel has introduced between the input side, the data, and the output side, which are the statistical results. And so far, we have very much spoken about the input side, the data side, how to collect data. So I would be interested to learn a little bit more about the output side, the indicators which are produced. You have distinguished between collaboration and co-creation. And as we know, there are the citizens often have a criticism against the big aggregates in statistics like the GDP, because they say these aggregates do not measure what we personally need. So how to engage by way of co-creation citizens and citizens groups, so civil society, NGOs, stronger in the design process of indicators, in the design process of the output, or the design process of the product portfolio of official statistics. Now, the second question, closely related, is that as a result of the history of official statistics, statistical offices feel responsible for social and economic data mainly. When it comes to environmental statistics, in particular biodiversity and so, or health statistics, they very often are seen as a little bit outside of the comfort zone, because people don't have the expertise in statistical offices. So isn't it a precondition that we now introduce biodiversity, for example, as a major responsibility into the mandate of official statistics? So in a couple of weeks, the UN Statistical Commission will come together, virtually or geographically, let's see. And then they will discuss the system of environmental economic accounts. And this is the point where I would believe citizen science could contribute very, very, very much to something which is not yet a statistical standard. So you see, I see the two sides, because I've worked 40 years in official statistics. Citizen science complements statistics in parts which, for the time being, are not seen as the main priority by the top managers in official statistics. And I think this is something which needs to be solved in order to make citizen science more popular and more relevant for official statistics. Thanks.
Wow, thank you very much. I mean, this is a very interesting question, and I start from the second one, simply because I'm not sure I am, the right person really to give you an answer on that. And I see your point. And one aspect that I really tried also to underline, during my presentation, and that I think is crucial, is that this data should be seen as something that comes to complement, whatever other sources, official sources of data are. And then given this, so given that they are, additional data, my personal point of view is the following one. So the indicators and the target, they've been decided, right? I mean, even though it was a pretty, open and crowdsourced process that basically generated the data at the moment, there they are decided. And there is very little that we can do to change that. However, I see two ways to contribute into them. One is the official data, the one that you, statistician need to provide your famous number to your government, and your government will provide to the UN, right? That is written what it needs to be. And honestly, I don't know to which level citizen science can contribute to that specific number. For me, it's still hard to understand if we will ever get to a point where citizen science project and data can really help you contribute that number, because the indicators are so specific and sometimes so meaningless for, some of the countries, some of the realities. However, this data, the idea is we want you to use it. And this is why I'm here today doing this presentation, because we want you to take them seriously. And then basically what you do with that is, at a certain point, the UN was talking about these proxy indicators, right? Which are indicators that simply, or let's say data that can be used to highlight a certain issue or a certain need or a certain problematic in a certain place, and can be used as data that are like a red flag that say here in this place about, I don't know, quality of water, there is a problem, even though maybe in this country, the single number that you are providing about water quality is actually good. So these are data that basically should help you as national statistical offices to better, it's a question of granularity. I don't have to explain this to you guys. I mean, you know it very well. I mean, we are basically offering the opportunity to provide data that reflect better the reality of, the country that you are handling. And then if you can actually use those data exactly for the indicator is questionable, but you can certainly use them to achieve the SDGs. So to get, your country in a better shape on many different aspects.
So maybe I could ask a follow-up question just from the chat. So we had someone who wanted to look with, to see if there was see if this is from Shelley Trim. Wanted to know, can you provide a resource that describes in more detail how citizens were used in a project, if possible, both a social science project and an environmental science project? I'm interested in seeing how this method can be used for marginalized communities, especially interested in how citizens are using data analysis. Thanks.
These are difficult questions because there are honestly tons of examples in basically most of the fields and the domain of science and research. So what I would say for the kind of project that I defined as analysis project, so people somehow behind the computer, I would recommend that you go and check platforms like Zooniverse, zooniverse.org, or there you will find example basically in every disciplines of science. However, there are not examples that have to do with data collections, and there are, a lot of them. I don't think, unfortunately. Actually, let me give you another advice. Again, just to have an idea of the breadth of methodologies and way to do citizen science. Another is the EXA website. I will put all of these links in the chat, and I just simply invite you to go to these websites and just browse the different projects that are there. again, to give you an idea of what you can do.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Rosy. And yes, did I miss something? Yes, go ahead.
Perhaps if I could just
yes,
maybe I already wrote this in the chat box, but basically to say that when it comes to the question related to quality, that's one of the objectives of the study that we are undertaking. As Gabriel mentioned, indeed, there are some principles that are already being applied during the data collection stage. So the idea of the study to try to see to what extent some of them could be accounted for, and maybe some corrections could be made, because as citizen science projects are being developed, there is an opportunity also to provide guidance on some of the things. And as Rosy explained, citizen science community has been actively collaborating with universities, so academic community. So the statistical guidance, scientific guidance was there, but not necessarily from the official statistics side. So the idea is also to see to what extent the principles guiding the production of official statistics one can improve on in terms of the design of citizen science projects. And then also to see, as I mentioned, in which areas that could be particularly relevant. And maybe on environmental indicators also, the adoption of the SDGs, it's a really great opportunity, because indeed its citizen science data is already contributing to the production of some of the environmental indicators. And many countries, from what we've seen working with the countries, have been having a growing interest in strengthening environmental data. So it can be a good opportunity to start using citizen science data for environmental indicators.
Thank you, Elena. So we are already a little bit over time. That is why I would say we conclude at this point. But I would also say that if you have further questions for Elena and Rosy and would like to continue the discussion and ask more questions, please reach out to them. You can do this either by contacting them via email, or you can contact them on the global network of data officers and statisticians. I would like also to point out that this global network has really grown already to a good size of members. We have today reached a milestone, which is 1,000 users on the global network. So this is a growing community. Please join it. And also please join us next time for the global network webinar. We will have next time something on the World's Women 2020. And with that, I would like to conclude by saying thank you again to Rosy and to Elena. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.